Beep beep. What is up, ninjas? My name is Sam World, and today I'm here joined by Ssol and Fab Massimo. Hopefully, I said that right. And today we're gonna go in the dojo with him, and he's gonna be showing us one of his tracks called "My Man," which did really well, 206,000 streams on Spotify. And I'm super excited to pick your brain on this track, Fab. How are you?
Yeah, awesome. I'm great. Thanks for having me. I actually played a really big gig this weekend in Berlin, so I'm really hyped to go further into music. And yeah, as I said, I've been watching your channel for a long time, so it's a big deal for me to be here, and I'm excited. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, it's Fab Massimo.
There you go.
I don't have the accent on the I anymore. I used to have that in the beginning, and then it was Massimo, but now it's Massimo.
Massimo, like that means strong, right? Like big, huge.
Uh, if you wish, yeah.
Okay, you know how I like it, Fab. You know how I like it. First off, tell us a little bit about this track. How did it come out? Like, what was the idea for it? Tell us a little bit of like a story, like hype it up a bit.
Interestingly, this song is the main idea of this song is already quite old. I found the vocal for My Man, which is it's Chain of Fools by Riss, I think. I found this like 4 years ago, and I wanted to use it in a song ever since. And I started off with like just having the vocal and putting a basic beat under it. 4 years ago, and then I just let the project sit for a long time, and I just got back to it like at the end of 2020. I picked it up and I thought, wow, this vocal is still, it's a great vocal, and it's well known. You hear in many other tracks, you can hear bits of it, like other producers just taking parts of it and putting it in their songs, but I thought I want to like use the whole vocal because that hadn't really been done before. And yeah, so the vocal was really the main thing, and then I wanted to make a beat that sounds like me, so kind of hard, kind of heavy, big synths, and yeah, something that kind of sticks out.
When you've got a vocal and you're revisiting this track and you want to build around that, what do you really start with when you've actually got such a powerful vocal? Do you start with a kick and bass, or do you start with synths or something?
Well, I always start with kick and bass all the time, and usually I once I get a good groove going with the kick and the bass and just some very basic hats or just a random loop I take, so I get the idea what it could sound like, how it could be grooving. Then I just put the vocal on top, and usually it fits if it's the right tempo, you know. You put the vocal on top, and it works really well, especially with this one, because when you take into account the lyrics, which is kind of this sad or kind of angry person after a breakup who got betrayed by their man. It kind of makes sense to just have a rough, hard groove underneath it.
Going to the club. Or going to the club. Forget him. That's sick, man.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So talking about the kick and bass, do you mind showing us the kick and bass, discussing a little bit of the processing, but also if you have any like tips or on how to create like a very sick rolling bass? That would be great to see.
Yeah, definitely. I can show you all my research from the past years about making rolling basses. Well, this project is a little bit different than all of my other rolling basses, because this one's also kind of bouncy. Let me just start off with the kick so we have everything in order.
Yes, sir.
The kick is taken from a stem I got from a good friend of mine. He's a producer. He's called Needs No Sleep, and we used this kick in our collaborations, and it's a really strong kick, even though it's very short. Like it's below 200 milliseconds. It still has this peak, this bass peak down here, which is really kind of high, and that makes it really thumpy, really punchy. In this track, I usually don't do this, but in this track it worked really well. I added a multi-band compressor because I felt like even though this is already a very good kick, it was a little bit too dull. And you know what multi-band compression does is it kind of levels out all the frequency spectrums. Like you have these three bands right here, the highs, the mids, and the lows, and it kind of brings them closer together. There's a preset which is called multi-band compression when you go to dynamics and multi-band, and I just used that one, dialed it in, and you can hear that it makes the kick even a bit cleaner, a bit punchier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's the mids. It's kind of like
Right.
you
Mm.
EQ'd the mids out, but you used the multi-band to do it in a more dynamic, full way. That sounds right.
Exactly. I would definitely recommend bouncing this before you export the whole track, but I looked at the waveform and it seemed to be relatively constant all the time, so it was working.
Awesome.
Then I always check if there's some phase cancellation between the bass and the kick. And I do this by putting a utility on it, switching these two on. And what this does is it inverts the sound waves of the sample. And so when I listen to kick and bass together, I can kind of hear if there's a big difference between having the kick phased in one direction or phased in the other. And sometimes it does make a huge difference when you have a kick that's in the same key as your bass. They're gonna end up at the same point of the spectrum and cancel each other out or add each other up. So yeah, that's in my opinion that's important to check. Yeah, and then besides this is just automation for the breakdowns where I take out the bass. I always give it a little push down here with a little bit of resonance. So when the bass is taken out, you can still hear it well. I've shown you the kick already, so let's go to my bass. And I've done some I've done something here that I haven't done in any other track before, which I'm gonna come to in a second, which is this this automation curve right here. Yeah, but just as a starter, what I do for most of my basses is, and my basses are quite simple. I use Silent or Serum, both work fine. I find Silent to have a bit drier saw wave. I mean, the good thing about Serum is it's a wavetable, so you can create as many waveforms as you want and create your own, which have not so much sub. But the silent waveform just by itself already has not so much sub. And that's what gets the bass rolling, is that you take away the very lows a little bit and you kind of focus on the second lowest harmonic. You can see there are different harmonics here, and what gets the bass rolling is cutting out a bit of the lowest ones, because that's just sub. It's not something you're gonna hear. It's more something you're gonna feel, and I think that's what the kick should provide, is the sub. And the roll you get more around, like, let's say 70 to 100 hertz. And so in most of my tracks, what I do is I equalize them simply like this, just cutting out the very lows and maybe giving it a little boost around here. And that gets it rolling really well. In this track, I didn't do this because it was working already like this. So I just had the EQ curve like this, cutting out a bit of the mids, leaving in some of the low mids, because those are, as I said, are important for the rolling sound. And also adding a little auto filter, which already rolls off quite a bit of the sub. So there's more headroom, you can make it louder, and it rolls more, rolls better. I really love to give the bass a little bit of stereo feel. I mean, they say your bass shouldn't be in stereo, especially when you're in like the sub area, should be mono. But like adding a little bit of, for example, with the dimension expander, I think it's a free plugin, which is from Xfer. It's basically the dimension expander that's inside Serum, and you can get it as a separate plugin. Just dialing that in a little bit, and also the Protoverb, which is also a free plugin, a free reverb plugin, which I also like to dial in just a little bit. The wet's just a little bit turned in. So the bass gets kind of a stereo feel. And in order to have that stereo feel, I don't need the full spectrum. So what I did here is I rolled off the side information, which is the stereo information, up to, what is it, like 160 hertz. I mean, you can try different frequencies. You could probably do it down here. You could do it up here. But in this case, it worked really well like this. Like this is really, really dry. Could also be cool, but I liked it more like this.
Ooh, that protoverb gives that bass character, man.
Exactly. A lot. It does a lot of character.
So
Yeah,
Fab, you
what
were saying
else?
you were
Yeah.
saying when you were doing your low end and you're kicking your bass, you would sometimes put like a loop on top of it. Was that while you're deciding what your bass pattern's going to be, or is that just to give you? How do you use that loop to help you make your kick in your bass?
Well, usually I just start off with the kick and the bass without a loop and just get something going. I just experiment with like 16th notes and putting some notes up and down, um, like I did in this case, really. And then when it sounds kind of good and I want to keep going, then I just add a clap and some hi-hats. But I usually don't use a loop in order to help me write a bass line. Like I don't pay attention to that the notes of the bass groove match up with the groove of the hi-hats or something like that.
Do you do any of mixing of the two elements together? So do you have a low end bus where you mix the kick and the bass together? And if so, what sort of things do you tend to do?
No, not really. I do mix my kick separately from the rest of the drums, but I think most producers do that. No, not really. Like I do a lot of mixing, um, as I said, with matching those two tracks up with each other, but I usually don't process them in a bus or something like that.
So last question on getting, for me, on getting a perfect rolling bass. What do you think about variation for a perfect rolling bass in terms of the bass pattern?
I think generally in tech house it should repeat itself. So you get inside the groove, and it shouldn't be too complicated, but it does make sense to have some sort of variation once in a while. In this track, every time this blue pattern comes, this is also where I have this gritty synth. And that's just because that synth is playing different notes, so I wanted the bass to play the same notes as that one. But I think in general I wouldn't have changed the pattern too much. Like if I have a good pattern, I'll keep it throughout the track. I might use some more repetition, like repeat it in shorter intervals when I'm in a build-up, for example. But generally, I just keep it like that.
So I noticed on the MIDI pattern too, you have overlapping notes.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
I'm assuming that you're using silent with portamento on it to get some sort of like pitch bend instead of dialing that in.
Exactly. I'm in solo mode, mono legato. So the notes kind of bounce back and forth, which is also kind of the character of this preset I made, because it does have a short cutoff, which is automated. So every time the note plays, the cutoff closes a little bit. So you get that plucky feel a little bit, and also a little bit of pitch automation when every note hits. So it's not only plucky, but it's also punchy, right? Exactly. And then also with the mono legato, it takes some time for it to reach the new note, and it kind of bounces back and forth, and I feel like it makes it sound fatter. Like I can't explain why, but it just does.
we got kick and bass out of the way. Most important elements
Yeah.
and takeouts. Let's check out the synths.
To get this like very broad and aggressive feel, um, I did this in this track, and I did it in Smile for Me too, is have a synth that has one oscillator with the root note and one oscillator that's pitched up 7 semitones. And if you don't have that, it's just a basic saw wave. And with it, it's a lot more aggressive. And you also get the opportunity to pan them to the side a bit, so you also get some stereo feel, and without any phase issues, because they're just going to be added together easily. Filtering, I personally, I just love basic sounds, and I love the saw wave. So that's just, yeah, it's just the saw wave. It has some monolegato on it and some slide mode, so it also slides with the notes. So they kind of sound like one going up and down. And there's a little bit of compression on it. I don't think I did too much of it. It's just like when you open a new preset, the basic preset for compression, some equalization. As I said, I don't want anything to conflict with my kick and bass, so I just cut out anything that's too low. But I usually listen very carefully how much of the sub I can cut out, so it still maintains its character. I have it like this, and I gave it a boost right here because I was listening to the whole mix in its entirety, and I felt like it needed a bit more of this to really punch through and to be really aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
In this area up here is more, adds, in my opinion, adds more aggression, and down here, it can make it dull if you boost like this. So for an aggressive sound, I boost the higher mids, so to say.
I love on this sound the reverb tail that you created on it. Did you put the OTT after the reverb to really sort of pull that out?
Exactly. Yeah, that's if you want a reverb tail that also sounds rich and aggressive, you should probably add some compression afterwards. And I already used the sausage fattener, which is just a one knob plugin, which adds a lot of distortion. It has its own character. And then the OTT, which is one of my favorites, it just smashes.
Yeah.
It's so hard, and makes it so aggressive. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Be careful with it though, because it usually adds a lot of sub again. Second synth, yeah, is my signature, which, well, I really love this sound. It's kind of this techno saw. I like to mix up genres a little bit, and this
Sick.
sounds more like a techno, like a sound you would expect from techno. And it is, to be honest, it's derived from a preset from Serum, which is the Super Alba, but I've changed it up a little bit. I used some different saw waves. This is also a tip. I downloaded a set of waves which are analog modeled, so they sound a little bit more old school, if you wish, a little bit less modern. So they also have a little bit less sub. And I just like the character of those. Like, for example, they're from the 303 or the Juno 60 Mini Moog. And I used this saw for this one. And basically this sound, which is, as I said, it's a typical sound from techno, is just two saw waves, again, that are detuned against one another. Like in this case, is minus 23 cents down versus 27 cents up. And then there's just some filter automation. Every time the note is played, the filter closes. I've added some reverb. It's just a drum room from Fab Filter, but you can use any reverb. Ableton also has some good reverbs you can use. OTT once again. It's not dialed in as much as for the other sound. but still to make it a lot grittier versus plus. Then I took away some of the sides because in mono it was losing some volume. So if you have a sound that you don't hear as clear in your mono version than in your stereo, you can always take away some of the sides and boost the volume. So it still feels quite stereo, but it doesn't lose as much volume when it's played in mono. And then I think I tried a second OTT, but that was too much. And then some delay at the end, just to also give it some character, to broaden it a little bit, and so also the sound doesn't stop right when the note stops. It kind of goes on playing.
So you got great sounds in the track, but when it comes down, I guess a lot of people struggle is how to create those top lines on the song. Like, how do you go about that when you have a kick and bass groove going, but now you got to add the synths on top, if you even want to add any? How do you create something on top that adds to it versus taking away from the initial idea?
Yeah, in this case, I think I actually looked at the bass notes
Mm-hmm.
and kind of looked what the rhythm is and what notes I could actually put on top, because like if I have very different bass notes from my lead notes, it's gonna sound not it's gonna sound a bit dirty and not well produced in my opinion. um so I was looking, okay, I have this root note which is just a C, and a lot of 16th notes,
Yeah.
and with this sort of swing on it. So I gotta make something that's kind of similar to it. And once again, I have 16th notes here, and I'm just jumping up and down octaves. Like this is a C, this is a C, this is another C, and so I know they're gonna fit on the bass groove. And
No, yeah, you're definitely using the same notes. You're using C and C sharp, so semitone up and
exactly. Then for the next one, I have just a little variation. Maybe add another C before it, or put another C at the end. So it
sick.
kind of, there's some variation in it, and it's not the same sound all the time. But in essence, there are very simple melodies. They're just more like they are kind of like one shots, but in a melodic way.
Now that we've covered all those awesome synths that you've got going on in this track, do you want to take us through how you put the percussion together? So all the drums.
Yeah, definitely. These drums are actually quite simple. Well, in my opinion, they are. But I usually build around a main clap and a main hi-hat, and then everything else is just like on top. Just have just a
Trap clap.
yeah, it's a trap clap. It's just a basic 808 clap, I think.
Yeah.
Nothing too fancy. Sometimes I put some overdrive on it. It didn't need it in this case. I compressed it a little bit, and because the kick and the bass should sound so big, I also cut out a lot of the like low mids. So it's like altogether the clap's still there and it's quite present, but when you hear it by itself, it's kind of thin. I used to always use a drum rack and put in different sounds and just combine them and see what works. So it is a closed hi-hat combined with a shaker. So you do have the attack of the closed hi-hat, but also the hiss of the shaker. And then gradually, as I go through the track, I will add more layers to it. But this one, which is the main hi-hat, will be the most predominant one all throughout the track. So if a 909 hi-hat comes in, it will be mixed quieter than the rest of the hi-hats.
Awesome.
So I have the main hat,
the intro,
and then I have a then a longer one, which is an open 808, and then the Tech House 909.
Sick.
But you still hear that the main hi-hat is still the loudest one. And in order to achieve that, for example, this 909 hi-hat, when you hear it by itself, it doesn't have an attack because the attack is already provided by my other hat. And
Proper
I
way to
really
layer. It's proper way.
exactly. And
job.
for example, here I took off the attack. I didn't want it so long because I'm gonna add some reverb, and then I just wanted to have the main character of it, which is this resonance, this typical house music resonance that you're gonna have. And so I boosted it so I don't need to make the whole sample so loud. So you hear like the typical 909 hi-hat character, but you're not losing as much headroom because it's just this resonance that I really want to hear.
Yeah.
So I have these shakers, then I have this battery plug-in from Native Instruments just with some random sounds, some drum machine sounds. I'm not even sure which ones. Oh yeah, just some closed hi-hats in between to add some groove, also with the groove right here. And I don't know, this is a rim probably. So just filling up everything with different samples, different sounds to get it grooving. And then also very typical of tech house is to have this snare. Yeah. And this one,
Dale.
I mean this one this snare is from my sample pack.
Sick.
I also used on this one I used the protoverb because it makes it so broad and it has this really nice resonance. So I just love this snare sound. It's unique, I think. Yeah. By the way, you can get my sample pack from Sennheiser if you.
Sick. I didn't know you had one.
Cool.
That's great.
What's it called?
It's called Slate Tech House. It's been out since May. They reached out to me almost a year ago, and and asked for a sample pack, so I made one. And yeah, it's out there. And if you want to make powerhouse like me, then definitely look into it.
Massimo Powerhouse.
So Fab, I saw you added some different reverbs on different drum channels. What's your thinking behind doing that? So you have different amounts on different channels rather than just having, for instance, like one reverb for all your drums.
Well, I think of it this way. I just have different drum sounds in different areas of my mix, and some sounds are just plain dry, like the shakers, for example, because I also want them to be close to my ears, like kind of like an ear candy too. And then the clap, for example, just should just have a big tail in this track. Doesn't have to be like this all the time. Like Chris Lake, for example, has his drums really, really dry, and it still sounds great. But in this case, I wanted the snare to have a big reverb, and then the proto-verb is more like an ambience. So it's not really a reverb. It's a very, very short reverb. So it puts the sound into a context of something, but it doesn't have a reverb tail or something like that. So it sounds stereo. It sounds like it's in a room, but it still makes sense for your brain because this is just an ambience. So your brain thinks it's really close to your ears. And then I recommend using maybe one or two more rooms for an element that's further away, and then one element that's very far away. So
any drum bus processing? So you do have them going into a group. So
I do have them going into a group. It depends. Like I kind of found myself using the saturator recently to on my drum bus because saturation is kind of a mixture of a little bit of distortion, just a little bit, and also a little bit of compression. So I mean, you can most producers or a lot of producers like to compress their drums on a bus, and I felt like for this track I could get away with just using the saturator with it. I apparently I tried also a multi-band compressor, but I think that was just too much
Yeah.
compression on the drums. It sounded, yeah, every sound lost kind of its character and it sounded over compressed, so I didn't do it in the end. Sometimes I just use the glue compressor and dial it in a little bit. I mean, they have some drum presets that you can play around with and see what sounds best. And then the main reason I use a drum bus is so I can automate the drums all together, in this case with an auto filter. So this is also a tip when you're in a build up. Um, you can work with volume, making all elements or certain elements quieter before the drop, so the drop seems louder when it hits. And I like to take out a little bit of the very high frequencies from my drums before the drop, so when they go back in, they sound bigger again, you know. And then at the end of the main drop, so to say, I filter them out completely.
Looking at the auto filter and the delay, they look like you're using them for creating builds.
Mm-hmm.
Can we take a
Exactly.
look now at some of the arrangement that you've used for this track? And in
Yeah,
particular,
definitely.
I love the big build in this track and how it works with the vocal. So I'd
Mm-hmm.
love to look at how you've broken that down and how you've used the vocal there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was actually a very good thing about this vocal, because it has two verses and a chorus, so to say. So I could, um, as I said, I like to build up the track all throughout. So I start off with just an intro which introduces the basic groove, but this is not a section you're probably going to hear on the dance floor, because this is just for mixing, and you're going to bring the track in right when the vocal comes in for the first time. So this is just mixing it in. Mini breakdown, always with this typical tech house string that also gets filtered in a bit. Um, and some snares, which are also filtered in.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
snare
And
roll.
For 5 long years, I thought you were my man. But I found out, love, I'm just a link in your chain.
so yeah, when you hear this is when the track gets mixed in. So you have the vocal directly, and it sounds really big. You have the drum groove and the bass and everything. You hear the first verse, and right now you could also hear that I've filled up some of the like holes with different sounds, and then you're in the track, and now I just wanted people to kind of trick into thinking this is what the groove is going to be like the entire track, right? So you have a verse and then the groove again. Now also with this body vocal and some ear candy sounds. Ah man, I need a new computer. Anyway, then then you get into the second verse, and one more layer gets added. Now we have sort of one open hi-hat in the second verse.
Tell me why you want me. I ain't nothing but your boo. You treated me mean.
And it goes on and on.
Oh, you treated me
And
cruel.
now, up until this part, you think this is going to be like the track, because it's tech house and usually it just goes on like this. So next up, I made this breakdown, which is just, it's very simple. It's just the vocal once again, both verses this time. It's the string. It's a snare roll all throughout. A friend of mine said there's just too many snare rolls in this track.
He's wrong.
And some automation, some reverb automation. I always put some reverb automation on my master for my build-ups. so the sounds get thinner all throughout the build up
I'm just a link in
and
your
pushed more into the
chain.
background. And then I have some
You got me where you
some
want
risers.
me. I ain't nothing but your boo. You treated me mean. Oh, you treated me cruel.
And now you hear this lead for the first time. So once again, for this drop I've added another layer. I've added the lead and also the ride, which is coming in for the first time in this part of the song. So yeah, and then after this drop, I wanted to bring it back out and create a big breakdown and change the tone completely of the song. And yeah, have this big impact first.
Favorite part of the song, by the way.
Yeah. And this is just one note playing all through. It's not no magic behind it.
Chain, chain, chain.
And this bass line, which is kind of like gives this hopeful, happier vibe. And then this synth plays the same notes. It's the same one as this one. And also the string, really important, also gives it this, I don't know, this kind of epic vibe. And also this sound, which is also a pad. Right, and then I just put the vocal on it, and I thought this works perfectly together.
In the dojo on air.
For 5 long years, I thought you were my man. But I found out, love, I'm just a link in your chain.
Yeah, and then the rest of the track is just I mean, it's house music, so you need repetition. So I needed to put back in the synth sound that I had before. It's playing once again. Also with first half just it playing by itself, then second half
Mhm.
with this pad sound, and also adding some hi-hats and some drums. So to still keep it dynamic. And then the rest is just outro, taking
Yeah.
out elements.
For 5 long years, I thought you were my man.
Yeah, the thing is, I think originally this is, yeah, there's like noise in between. Oh, there's a delay in between, and you hear part of the recording where the part of the beat where they recorded the vocal. And I didn't want it to be in there, so I cut it up really abruptly. But it doesn't sound good, obviously, if it's just cut off like that. So I knew I would need some reverb and some delay to kind of mask that away. Yeah, and so this is where this reverb comes in. This is just a reverb from Native Instruments. Then some saturation, just to make it a bit fatter, a bit grittier. I've added this stereo touch. It's also a free plugin, which gives any sound width, but I think it makes it by using a delay, so you get you're getting some sort of phase issues, or at least when you're going back to mono, you're losing a lot of volume. So to compensate for that, I added a utility and dialed away a lot of the side information. So now I have a sort of stereo feel, because this recording is just plain mono. So now I have a stereo feeling a little bit. Yeah, but it's not too much, and the vocal still kind of sits kind of in the middle of the track. Then just some EQing to
For 5 long years,
cut out some sub, even though there isn't much in there, but
for 5 long years.
this way I can just make sure I'm not running into any problems. I have a limiter on here too. Oh yeah, it's doing a lot actually. That's the thing is, that's the same reason I did this, because I didn't want my limiter at the end in my mastering chain to have to handle all this information. So I limited down here. I know it's very aggressive, but that way I can get out a lot of perceived volume. I have an automation on the tell verb to really get this open atmospheric feel, because as I said, this awesome reverb plugin, it's free, and it gives it a really wide feel.
Now every chain has got a weak link. I might be weak now, oh, but I'll give you strength.
Oh, that reverb reminds me of like "Show Me Love." You know, like that vocals has a similar sort of reverb to it. A little warmer, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so yeah, some reverb automation on here, and yeah, that's my vocal processing.
and that's the track. Well, I have one more question for you:
Yeah, sure.
to roll or not to roll?
Oh, that is the question. Yeah.
All right, man. Fab, again, thank you so much for coming on and showing us a little bit of the workflow, your track, which is amazing. Now, is there anything you want to let us know that's going on with you? Any future releases, sample packs?
Well, firstly, thank you once again. Thank you so much for having me. It's a huge honor. As I said, I've been a huge fan of your channel for such a long time. And as I said, there is a sample pack. It's called Slate Tech House. It's on Sennheiser. You can get it. You can listen to it. It's got a lot of loops and a lot of my signature sounds. There will be more releases in the future, definitely. I'll be trying to focus more on releasing fewer tracks, but with higher impact. But there are some things coming out this year and next year. And and I'm also doing master classes. I have a couple of students right now. I can probably fit in 1 or 2 more. If that's something you're interested in, learning all the details, exchanging projects, sending them back and forth, getting immediate feedback, you can also hit me up on Instagram at Fab Massimo. And
Awesome,
thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. So, guys, that's been In The Dojo with Ssol and Fab Massimo. Said it right this time. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Peace out.
For 5 long years.